Welcome back to part two of my lecture this week, and I want to spend some time talking about jargon. In many ways, jargon and slang are similar in that they encode your membership in a group, but jargon is a little different because it's encoding the professional or the hobby interest that you have in your life. So, to explore jargon, let's first talk about what a lexicon is. And a lexicon is a list of words or a bank of words that you have in your head that you know and you use. Maybe every day, but each person has a different lexicon. So you have a different bank of words that you use because you build this lexicon throughout your life, and it's built upon your own unique experiences. So no two people are going to have the same lexicon, and that's because no two people are the same. So if you're interested in football, then part of your own word bank is that you're going to probably have a lot of football terminology that you use. And if you are not interested in football and know nothing about it, then that's a group of lexical items, a group of words that you don't have in your lexicon. Alternatively, if you're interested in music, then you're going to have music terminology in your lexicon. So if you're interested in both football and music, then you've got both of those items and you've got terminology from both those items in your lexicon. If you're interested in neither, then you don't have lexical access to any of those items. And so basically any hobby or professional interest you have comes with it its own jargon that then encodes itself in your lexical bank, in your own lexicon. It just kind of depends on the interests and the professions that you have. So usually jargon is just a bunch of technical terms that are distinct to a specific interest, hobby, profession, or culture. Sometimes these words have a different meaning for the insiders than for the outsiders. So it's sometimes used to distinguish insiders from outsiders, kind of like the shibboleth we talked about in the first lecture. So when we say that sometimes these words have a different meaning for the insiders than the outsiders, than the general public, here are some examples. When we hear the word attitude, generally we think of someone's emotional state or a teenage girl giving an attitude. But in ballet, the term attitude actually means something different. It means a body position, a specific body position they're supposed to take. Same with atlas. We think, in general, I'm sure when I say atlas, you think of a map, but in architecture, this term refers to a column or a person looking like structure of support. So it has a specific meaning in architecture that it doesn't have for us as non-insiders of architecture. And with advertising, with that word, you think maybe of people trying to sell you something. We went over to last week we talked about the I'm loving it ad, and we think of that as advertisement, right, from McDonald's. But in poker, this word represents something different. It represents someone making an obvious play that shows off their cards or how they're going to play poker. So again, each of these terms above has a generic meaning to the public, but a field specific meaning to the group that they belong to. So in these ways, it works very much like the shibboleth we talked about in the first lecture. Here on this slide, I've pointed out a variety of types of jargon. Here are just a few examples. There are many. And I've listed linguistics jargon because I'm sure in this course you've already heard some jargon, some technical terms specific to linguistics that you had not heard before or you didn't have this level of knowledge about some of these words that we've used so far until you've been in this class. So let's talk about a type of jargon more specifically to get an idea of how this works. And we're going to talk about gaming jargon, which for the record is not really in my own lexicon, but it's a great example of how jargon works and how it's at play. Some of you might be better gamers than me, in which case feel free to give me tips or corrections if this is off the mark, but this is what I know. So it says here at the bottom, are you a noob or elite? And you probably noticed that they're spelt kind of weird. This alone, these are all features of gaming jargon. So in the jargon set, we've got words that indicate proficiency level, like noob, which means that this person is a low-level gamer. They're probably not very proficient yet. And we've got versus elite player, which comes from the word elite, I'm an elite person, which represents high proficiency players or high proficiency gamers. So, noob is actually taken from a slang term that was generated by the US military, which was the term newbie. And newbie goes all the way back to the 1970s, as you can see in the Oxford Dictionary entry. And it really started out as just an army term that then was later borrowed and shortened by the gaming industry. Some of the features of gaming jargon that you've seen is that they may use numbers instead of letters in a word, such as in elite and noob. You saw those, the replacement of numbers in there instead of letters in the middle of those words. The use of these numbers can actually be an indicator of how intensely you participate in these games, how much of a member you are to this community, because insiders know how and when to use these numbers. And what's interesting is that there basically are some unwritten rules on when you use numbers instead of letters or letters instead of numbers. So there are appropriate times to use numbers and inappropriate times to use numbers. So for example, if you're having a brief interaction within the gameplay itself, you could use numbers instead of letters, but you wouldn't do this in a chat room talking about the game later. You would be expected to just use letters in a chat room. So that link at the bottom will take you to some other examples if you want to look at some more. So let's quickly talk about some other gaming features, because a lot of the early gaming, the communication was done by typing or chatting, right? Before everyone had headsets and just would talk, and now we can just talk to each other verbally through the game. But a lot of the jargon that actually came into existence for gaming came into existence because of typos. So back when we couldn't just talk, but we had to type all of our messages to everyone. So as an example of this, there's a word called pwned or pwnage that is used in the gaming community that actually comes from a typo of the word owned, to get dominated. You're owned. But the fact that it's spelled PWN came from a typo back in the early typing days of gaming. So that's kind of cool. Some of the gameage jargon actually comes from non-native speakers of English, because a lot of these earlier programmed games were actually programmed in non-native or non-English countries. So for example, there was a tech in one of the video games who said in the text of this game, you're reading it at the bottom, where it says, all your base are belong to us. And that definitely doesn't sound like something a native speaker of English would say, but that ended up being in a game that we were playing here in the United States, and now all these people that are in the gaming community know they know that phrase. So if they've been gaming for a long time, that's a very popular phrase that has meaning for them, and it's just kind of a known thing to those that have been in the gaming community for a long time. Here's the link where you can actually go see what I'm talking about if you'd like. And lastly, some new words are created by taking existing words and just adding new endings to them, such as the word griefer, coming from the word grief. And in English, we use the er, to indicate who's doing something. So a talker indicates the person who is talking. A walker indicates the person that is walking. So now a griefer indicates a person giving you a hard time. So that's kind of cool as well. But finally, a term that's really unique in the gaming industry is the Easter egg. So we know what an Easter egg is. It's, we know the Easter holiday and we put eggs in a basket, but it's not something you put in your basket. It's something that you hunt for, like an Easter egg, in which you hunt for maybe in order to bypass harder levels or harder positions, or to level up in the game faster. So that concludes my final lecture for week 4. Please contact me if you have any questions. Bye.